Welcome to this little showcase video about Storybook, a tool for creating components in isolation. We will look at this tool in this video in the perspective of making a full design system, and this will consist mainly of three parts. In the first one, we will create a simple button component with the help of Storybook. In the second part, we will see some major add-ons Storybook provides and which help in developing those components. And in the third part, we will look how publishing stories works and what the tool Chromatic has to do with it, which is also from Storybook, and how the governance of a design system can be handled by the help of Storybook. Yeah, and with that we will start with the first part, and I have already my Storybook instance running locally here, and as you can see we have no stories that are defined. And now we have to, at first we have to make our component, our first component, and for this we will use our IDE WebStorm. I have defined some basic styles here, which I will use throughout this tutorial. So basically some colors, CSS variables, and some fonts. And so let's start with our component. And what we need here, we are building this component with React in this tutorial, and I need some imports. And at first I will create a template button with the style components package. So these are styles that will apply for all of our buttons. No matter which buttons we create, we will always inherit from template button the styles. And for our example, it is sufficient to make one base button. So we have here our base button styled, which inherits the styles from the template button, and we will later on provide here additional CSS styles. And we have our base button React element, and we will export this base button. And this base button for now has only children as arguments, and they will be displayed inside of it, like in the button you would inside player text. Yeah, and this is our component for now. And now we have to write a story in Storybook to render it and to see if our component works in the DOM. And for this we go here to our stories, base button stories TypeScript file. And again, we will need some imports. And the first thing we have to do when creating a story is to export this object with some basic properties like the title. We are here in our React component library, and under buttons we want to create our base button component. A story for our base button component. Yeah, and our component we want to create our stories for is the base button. Yeah, and so this is the first thing we have to do. The next thing is we have to specify a template. I mean, there are other ways, but this is a good way to do it because you can reuse this template and make multiple stories out of it. We will see how this works later on. And this template has the base of base button, and now the only thing left is to create a story out of this template, and we will call this base button brand. And we will create this out of our template, and we provide some arguments for this. We can define any arguments we want as long as they are the same that base button needs, of course. And we provide here the argument base text. And we will look at our Storybook instance. and we need a refresher here. And as we can see, we have a base button brand, and our button is displaying. Great. So we have our first, we have written our component and our first story for it. And we have here the control panel and can, dynamically change the arguments here if we want to. And if we change it, we can also reset it here. Okay, then the next thing we want to do is to give our button life, enhance it a little bit, and write more stories for it. So what we will do is go back to our IDE, and we will switch to our component file again, and we will make a type here for our button style, base button styled. So some properties: we want our base button to control the font color, the background color, the font kind, and the outline if it's focused, so the border, the outline. Yeah, and I'll just insert those here, and yeah, this should work now. Yeah, cool. Okay, so these are the styles we need for our base button to make different stories out of it. And what we also have to do is to enhance our button component here. And yeah, this will be it. We have updated our button component with some styles and with some arguments. And now we will write additional stories for our button. I've provided some example stories. And the first one basically stays the same. Use the default background colors and font colors provided from the DOM. And we have also some other stories which give the button a different color, and we will see that we added those stories in the browser. Okay, now we see we have more stories, which is pretty cool, and we see that we can influence the color of our button here with the background CSS variable. And again, we can update this here dynamically. And yeah, which is pretty cool. And we already have some different stories for our button. And what we can also do to show how our button component can be used to with different font types is we copy, or do we type in some different stories with different fonts specified. So the fonts are specified in our CSS file. And saved it, and we will look at Storybook. Storybook already renders those additional stories we provided, and we see we have a much bigger font. The button is adapting to this bigger font, space to till the text stays the same in relation. And yeah, another font, and a very little small font. Yeah, it's pretty cool. We can also change this dynamically here. Yeah, nice. We have created for our base button multiple stories. And this is how you can do it with Storybook and build your component library. Now we also have a pretty cool feature that we don't only have canvas docs, we have also documentation about our base button component. And we can here see how the component is called, and then we could reuse this code in our application if we use that component, which is pretty nice. And we see that here that there would be a description and default values listed here, but we haven't anything specified in our TypeScript file. If we had, this Storybook would already infer that automatically and insert it here. So let's do that. Okay, so we are back now in our button component. And what we will do now is add some documentation in our code for our properties. And this is basically a description of our property. And we specify here the default value, so Storybook can use it then. And we will do this for each of our props, each of our props, yeah. And normally the IDE knows that these are comments, and you can collapse them then, which looks much nicer in the IDE. And we have added them here. And we will now take a look at our Storybook instance. And as we can see, there is now a description which we specified, and also a default value is given if we specified one, which is very practical documentation and clean ordered here in the docs of Storybook. Yeah, this was it from the first part of the video. We will now look at some add-ons. The first add-on we will have a look on, we can see in the canvas view, and we have installed the Axis accessibility add-on. And you can see here that this button has no violations. It has 4 parsers from the add-on, which you can click on and see here what is it that is wrong, or what is it that is correct. If we look at this button here, we see that he has a violation. Namely, it must have a sufficient color contrast, which is not given for this font color and background color for this button. So this was plugin number 1. The second plugin we will take a look at, we must include in the IDE. And we can do that in the stories file. We have to specify some things in the object we export from the stories TypeScript file. Namely, in parameters, we define that we want our button to be from type beta, so it's not ready for release, it's not stable, but it's from type beta. And if we save that and go to our Storybook instance, we see that it worked. All of our button stories are now from type beta, and so we have a tool for controlling and indicating on the first glimpse if a component is ready for shipping or not. Yeah, this was it about 2 of the plugins Storybook provides. And now we go to the third plugin, which is from the Storybook team itself and is for hosting Storybook and for governing all that goes on and the changes that will be made from the team. Okay, so now we'll take a look at the last part of our video, which is about Chromatic, the tool the Storybook team developed for publishing Storybook and sharing it with all stakeholders, and for reviewing all changes, and for governance rules. And this can be done by going again into the IDE. And in the package JSON we have here this Chromatic script, which is installed when we install Chromatic in our project, and we can then run it. And this is then publishing our stories, building a static build and publishing it. And we have not done our major changes to our project here, because we already pushed it something before. And if we now go to Chromatic website, and I'm already logged in, you can see here the builds we already did and which changes there were. For instance, on the first build, I published the following components and stories, and you can go into a story and take a look at it, and it makes snapshots, and it's comparing those snapshots with already with previous versions and what changed, and you can see it here, which is a pretty powerful tool. And you have, like in Storybook, the canvas showing everything, and the snapshot, which is just an image, and also the docs, of course, for the component. Yeah, and you have access to all builds you published, and yeah, it's indicating all changes for all branches you have. And in the library part, you can inspect, like in Storybook, your components. Let's inspect the button, and it's actually nearly nicer overview than in Storybook, which runs locally. You have here your branches listed and the builds for all branches you did. And then you have kind of version control here, and can take a look at components and how they changed over time. And here you can go over the different components, snapshots, and docs again, like before. You have also the possibility to connect your GitHub account and manage the pull requests here in Chromatic. Also, roles can be assigned here on the collaboration. Right now there is only one owner, which is me, David Ecker. And yeah, you can change the role. There has at least to be one owner, but you can invite people and add different roles for them. If you make a change, like from one build to another, here I updated one component, then you can take a look at the change and also accept it. This was accepted by me, it was just an example build. I have here a heading. You can't see the difference directly here, but if you go use Storybook, no, it was actually inspect snapshot and go to canvas, you see here that there is a margin, and if you inspect the snapshot on the second one, you see that there is actually a bigger margin here. So even this little change can be detected by Chromatic. This was the presentation about Storybook and Chromatic. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you for your attention.